Corporation of the Village of Miracle Wolford. Agenda for council at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, October the 6th, 2021. And this meeting will be held in person at the council chambers. However, due to the provincial emergency orders still in effect, we are unable to safely accommodate the public at this meeting. And in order to ensure transparency, the audio of this recording will be live streamed and posted on the website immediately following adjournment. And I thank members for all respecting guidelines, entering the building. You had your masks on, sanitize your hands at the front door. Seated at the table, your comfort level, keep your masks on. If you're speaking, it's all right to remove your mask for some clarity in our voices. We are at least, we'll go at a minimum 2 meters apart, and if you do have to get up and move around for any reason, please put your masks back on. And we've been doing that all along, and I'm sure we'll all continue to do so as we continue to stay safe. Having said that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask if anyone has a pecuniary interest, and if they do, with the general nature thereof. And I'm looking at all members. Everybody is nodding their head in the negative. Thank you for that. And I do have a motion to approve this afternoon's agenda, which is essentially our 2021 draft budget. So mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Mr. Halpenny, and a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Miracle Wolford does hereby approve the agenda of the special council meeting of April the 6th, 2021 as circulated. All in favor? And it's carried. Thank you. So from a process point of view, I believe that staff are going to make some comments at the beginning in terms of how we move through the process and what we will do this afternoon. And I think essentially is a high level from staff and showing us what we have in our packages in terms of the draft working documents, if you will, and how we move forward with that. So having said that, I'll turn things over to Mr. Robertson. Sir, good afternoon.
Thank you, Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I propose to the mayor, given the situation with the variants of COVID and the fact that we're very close to being able to present council with bylaw amendments for the procedure bylaw to hold virtual meetings, that this afternoon we are providing you with the line-by-line budget. The library budget submission grant request is in the package as well for you. I propose to the mayor that what we do today is have the library do their presentation. I believe that we have them lined up on the conference call to present to council. After which, subject to council having any urgent or process questions, my recommendation is that council take the budget away with you. Use the next week or so as a digest time, an opportunity for you to look at the budget line by line, formulate any questions or comments or concerns you may have. If council would be agreeable to perhaps, if you have questions that you feel you would like staff to answer, you could potentially provide those with us in writing by, say, Monday or so, and we would reconvene in a special meeting again perhaps next Wednesday or Thursday, council's availability. And at that point, you would have an opportunity to go a line-by-line review of the budget. What I'm conscious of is just with COVID-19 and the rest of the variants, I know all of us are feeling a little bit conscious of being in the room together. And since we're so close to being able to hold the meetings in virtual means, electronic means, that means that we could hold that line-by-line review virtually without that risk. And again, it also gives you a chance to review line-by-line yourself your budget instead of just having to try to formulate your thoughts after having just seen them at the table.
I'm looking at heads. I noticed a lot of heads were nodding in the affirmative. Would everybody agreeable to that process moving forward? Just a show of hands would be sufficient, unless there are any questions.
A question: what date did you want to go back and review this on?
Well, staff are at council's wishes, but potentially 1 o'clock on Wednesday, April 14th, or 1 o'clock on Thursday, April 15th. Certainly, we'll make ourselves available as council needs us.
And so we'll hold our questions till then.
Well, I would suggest just that in the past, what we've realized is we've tried to do a line-by-line review right out of the gate. And I think it might just pay a little bit more respect to council to have an opportunity to read through it at your leisure beforehand. And then on top of that, it'll give staff a chance, if you're able to send us your questions in advance, and we can come prepared. And that's, truth be told, more in alignment with the procedure bylaw process for questions from council.
So just to clarify, so you'll be doing as Mr. Robertson outlined this afternoon, and we do have Mary Kate, I do believe it's Mary Kate on the line from the library to the library budget presentation. But at any rate, if there are any questions from the material you're receiving today, have them into staff, we'll say noon on Monday, if that's a reasonable timeline, and that gives staff time to get the answers and share them with all members of council, and we would meet on Wednesday, if Wednesday is an agreeable day next week for all members. And I'm not getting anybody raise their hand saying no. And time of day, we could either do it start in the morning or one in the afternoon. Is there preference for morning or afternoon?
Afternoon.
Afternoon. So we would then be reconvening at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. Don't forget, we do have a regular council meeting on the Monday evening. So a show of hands, everybody, is that good for that process?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you all very much. So back to you, Mr. Robertson.
Great, so thank you, Richard, thank you, council. So what I would suggest at this point then, if council's comfortable with it, we'd invite the library CEO, and I think chair of the board is on the line to speak to their budget submission and their annual report. Immediately following that, before we get into the village's items on the agenda, what I would do for council at that point, I would just try to highlight some of the 6 or 7 key points out of the budget that staff have brought to you for your review today. And again, if council's agreeable to that, we certainly just refer to the library CEO and chair of the board.
So I'm
on the line.
sorry, if you just repeat the last part, Mr. Robertson.
Sorry, Worship. So I have some highlights to draw council's attention to when we get to item number 2, which is the draft operating budget for the village.
Yes.
But item number 1 on the agenda is the library draft budget, the grant request, and the 2020 annual report. So this would be the moment if the library CEO and chair of the board are on the line for them to speak to their submission.
Right, and then just remind members, again, you just received this, as is for the other documents in our package. So as far as I know, it'll be a high-level presentation. And again, if there are questions, there may be questions today, or we can have them on Monday to staff and or the library, and we can continue the conversation next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So having said that, so I do we believe have both on the line, the chair's board and the librarian, or just the librarian? Hello, Mary Kate.
Hello.
How are you?
I am fine.
Good. Are you able to hear us reasonably clearly?
I can hear you, and I can hear that other people are talking, but I can't really hear what they're saying.
Fair enough. Okay, if there are any questions from them, I can repeat them for you as we move forward. And it's just you on the line this afternoon?
My board chair was going to call, but I don't know whether or not he has.
Oh, okay.
He's going to call from home.
Fair enough. Okay, anyway, if council, as I say, has the library draft budget in front of them, so if you'd like to do your presentation, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I knew that this year the presentation would be a little difficult, so I tried to put everything that I needed to say into my handouts. So has people had a chance to look at them, or were they just getting them now? Sorry.
So
Just
yeah,
getting them now.
if there are any initial questions, we could do them now, and if
No, she said, she asked if we had seen them prior or we were just getting them now.
we're just getting there now, Mary Kate.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, because most of what I wanted to say is sort of explained in there. The annual report was really just for information. I'd be happy to talk about it maybe if people have questions, but I know that the budget meeting is long enough anyway, so I wasn't really going to talk about that. It was just so that people, council could know what has been happening at the library this year, which is sort of an unusual year, as we all know. But basically, just to quickly go over the budget for this year, for our operating grant, the library is asking for an increase of about just over $2,000 from last year. It's about 2%. And for the most part, we've been able to keep our expenses fairly flat. A few have gone up, some have gone down. But we've had a bit of a drop in revenue because the library has been closed first to the public. We can't use our meeting room, and we're not taking in fines during this time. So, and also donations are unpredictable at best, but we're not really sure what's going to happen in this year. So our revenue is down slightly, but it's fairly flat. The main thing that I wrote the little presentation about was asking about the building a grant. We were hoping to have that reinstated. For many years, when we were in the old building, every year council gave us some money that was used to maintain the building and do sort of exterior work altogether. And then when we moved into this new building, we were told that it was kind of paused because we didn't need any work for that. But now that the report from the CBO says that we will need ongoing work, we are hoping to get an annual grant that is sort of kept, and so we use it as we need it. So if it's not used 1 year, then it stays in reserve for the building, and then it's used for the next year when we need things done. The sort of history of how that worked and is sort of explained in the little report that I have there. I can go through it in more detail if you want, or you can read it over and ask me questions at a later time, or I'm not sure what's the best way of handling that. So I was under the impression that you might have got this in advance, so I was working on the theory that you would have possibly already read it.
Oh, go ahead. Yep. Mr. Cameron.
Yes, thank you. Mary Kate, just a quick question here. If council did entertain reinstating the building fund to maintain the building, how would this affect the library's budget? Would it allow them to increase the services in an expansion through an internet protocol, or more books, or maybe putting an extension onto the library, increasing it to meet the demands of a growing population? I'd just like to know, in your own words, how you feel that this grant would benefit the library, so we can think about it over the next week when we come back to discussions. Thank you.
Were you able to hear Mr. Cameron all right, Mary Kate?
I think so. He was asking how this is going to benefit the library in terms of services and stuff like that. Correct. The idea of this grant is to maintain the building so that the roof doesn't leak and that we have fewer mice and basically that the building doesn't deteriorate. It's for capital work on the building. If we were able to accumulate some and we were going to do a renovation or an addition or something like that, then it would also be money that we could use for that. The money that we had previously when we were in the older building was used for the renovations and for the move to this new building here, which is where it all sort of went. So that's what's anticipated. The library does have a reserve that we have. We received a bequest in 2015, and so that money we've got set aside for sort of service improvements and enhancements and things like that. So if we were going to add to collections or add new equipment or things like that. That's what that is kind of earmarked for. It's sort of discussed in my little handout. I can read that part. Yes, while the municipality has traditionally funded needed building-related expenses, the library board has obtained non-municipal funding for most newer services and discretionary items, and work to enhance the library service or space from fundraising by volunteers, such as the Friends of the Library, or external grants. And such expenses include library programs, e-collections, computers and software, IT support, website design, shelving, display units, furniture and equipment, discretionary cosmetic work on the building when we did some makeovers when we put in our chalkboard wall. Last year we put in some LED lighting, or replaced the fluorescent use of LED lighting, and we used donations and money from that reserve for that kind of thing. And securing stable funding for those things was a strategic plan objective for the board. They were pleased to be able to do that without requiring municipal money for that. So those are all expenses that the board has that we're not asking the municipality for, and this is what we want to use that reserve for. We don't, as far as we know, have a building reserve, like the money that's just for maintaining the building. And what we're hoping is to get that put back in so that we can keep that work done. We've got the report from the CBO that says that there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done now. And he's also said that it's going to be something that we're going to have to keep on top of going forward. It's not something that is like one and done. So that's why we would like to get the grant back the way we had it before, when we had to do ongoing maintenance on the old library building to keep it in shape.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary Kate. And we'll go back to your budget in general. Is there anything else from a highlight perspective you want to bring to council's attention?
Sorry, was that directed to me? Because I couldn't quite hear what you said.
She said, was that question directed to her?
Yeah, okay, no, just wanted to know if there was anything. Just so you know, there's a bit of a, I know you're not lisping, but there's a bit of a crackle every now and then on the phone line, so it sometimes crosses.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not you, I think it's the technology, so there you go. So that's, the highlights that Mary Kate has walked us through in terms of the draft budget, which everybody has, and if anybody has any questions, someone can ask them. Mr. Foster.
Yeah, the municipal grant that they were talking about for the building reserve, how much money are we talking about here in past years?
Sorry, could you, Mayor Struthers, could you repeat that? I couldn't quite catch
Yes,
it.
I think I captured the question. What was the amount in previous years
For the building.
and that's in reference to the $3,000?
Okay.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the amount in previous years? Was the
It
question?
varied from year to year. I think when I started in the 90s, it was around 3,000. By the time we moved, it was more like 5,000 or 10,000. We are optimistic, the library board is optimistic that there is some money in the surplus that we can put towards some of these repairs, and so we're asking for something to reinstate it. We're asking for a modest amount because we know pandemic is doing crazy things to budgets and all of that. So we thought a modest amount to start with, and then it's something that can be adjusted as from year to year, as depending on what needs to be done and things like that, and what's available. But from the board's point of view, we just like to make sure that this is back, so that it's something that we can plan for, and we have some idea of some revenue coming in. The library really doesn't have a revenue stream to fund this kind of thing other than the municipality. It's always been that we've got money from the municipality to look after the building.
So just so two parts here, and we'll go to the second part in a moment, and that is the clarifying the reserve fund that is in existence. It's clarity on that. However, more importantly for today's discussion and the 2021 budget is specifically the request to have the $3,000, an additional $3,000, if you will, in this year's budget specifically for the building repairs. If I captured that accurately, Mary Kate?
Yes, and the idea is that the building grant is one that's not, like, it doesn't disappear at the end of the year. It just kind of, if it's not used, it's there for next year when you might have a more expensive job or
Yeah,
whatever.
Indeed, right, thank you. Supplementary question, Mr. Foster?
Yeah, the big ticket item being the roof, has the library board separated the reserve fund into building, books and ongoing, not services, sorry, I'm looking for the word, but basically, have you broken your reserve down? And is there money available in your reserve fund to repair the roof?
And I think that's where Mary Kate was alluding to, getting some clarity on, in terms of the reserve fund that exists, you know, how are those dollars meant to be used? Is that a fair way to phrase it, Mary Kate? You know, whether it's building or books or programs? And so that's,
Yes.
so that's something to be.
The reserve that we have now, which is the library reserve, is what we see as being for all of those library enhancement things. As far as we know, we don't really have a building reserve. We spent all that when we moved. I understand from the treasurer that what's in the surplus is something that we could use towards capital projects like the building work. But the board is not 100% clear on all of that, and we're kind of looking to have a meeting with the treasurer at some point to try and kind of nail down where exactly all that is. So that's a separate issue that we'll be asking about later on. But
Thank you, yeah, and that was what I alluded to.
The question, or do you
No, that's what I was alluding to earlier, sort of two parts to it. The second part is what Mary Kate is referring to right now, bringing some clarity to the existing dollars that are in the library reserve.
Well,
And so anyway, back to you, Mr. Foster, so there is.
Yeah, my question, Mary Kate, is we're attempting to build our budget for the year. We would really like to know how much the library is prepared to pay for this capital project. And are we going to be on the hook for the entire thing? Moving forward, you have programs, books, and possibly building, or at least the inside. Are you going to break that down within the next short while, so we know what you have in your building fund, if you have anything?
Well, I think that's the point in terms of the existing dollars. What are those dollars meant to be used for?
So how do we determine our budget this year if we don't know what they need?
Well, can I just speak to that? If you look at the line on the budget that we broke down, we're projecting, and we don't really know how much some of these costs are, and we're not 100% sure we can even get the work done, because although we should be able to get, we've got someone who's going to come and do the roof. We're asking just for this year for the municipality to give us $3,000, and hopefully from surplus and from donations, we will be able to make up as much as $14,000 if we can do that. If things come under less than that, that's great. Or if we can't get the work done this year, then we'll put some of that forward. So what we're really asking for this year is $3,000 towards the building, and sort of an ongoing commitment to giving us a similar, or more is great, grant in ongoing for that. So we're not going to turn around and ask you to give us an extra, X number of $1,000 this year.
Yeah. So again, if we go back to budget 2021, the ask is for $3,000, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Cameron?
Yes, thank you. Mary Kate, I found that direction you were giving us for the $3,000 municipal grant. You want it to be an annual grant. As I'm reviewing your proposal here for the library's budget, I notice that there's some statements in here that say reserves and donations. That's on the first page. Last year's budget was $4,500. This year is $5,000 for special projects. And there's another reference here for reserve donations, building and equipment, $4,000, which was last year's, but there's nothing in for this year. So my original question that I asked you earlier, I guess it would be extremely important for the library to have a line item on their budget yearly with strictly for building maintenance, so that as we move forward on this, the municipality, if we decide to do so, on moving with this, that there's an established amount that the library can expect every year, and that those funds would be used only for building and expanding and building and repairs and damages to the building only. So I think that's what you're trying to ask here for the revenue for municipal building grant annually, is that you would like us to establish a yearly amount of money directed to the building only. Is that correct?
If I heard you properly, yes, that's exactly what we're asking for. That's what we used to get, and then, as I say, we asked for the building grant for a few years and just never got it, and so finally we, just took it off our request. But basically that's it. We put in like $3,000 or whatever, ask for the building thing, and there would be a $3,000 expenditure on building, strictly building maintenance, work. In the old building, we did things like painting that gingerbread and repointing the bricks. We put jack posts in the basement to support the floor. We put in a new furnace at one point when the old one died. That kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any other questions on the budget portion, then we do have a motion to receive the draft budget, the building grant request, and the 2020 annual report. Before I make that motion,
Yeah.
Mr. Malloy, sorry, thank you. Moved by Mr. Malloy, seconded by,
No, I wanted to ask a question.
oh, I apologize.
I thought you understood that, sorry.
Mr. Malloy.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify on a point. I'm trying to figure out why the library is spending money on the exterior of the building that they don't own. I mean, that building is not the library building. That roof is not the library's roof. That siding is not the library's siding. That's the municipal roof and municipal siding. Why are we not paying for the upkeep of our building?
And I think we had that conversation, and there may be information in our packages earlier. The library is leasing the building for the dollar a year. I don't have that document right at my fingertips, but it's in here. But that's the reason why, Mr. Malloy. The council already had that conversation, I believe, earlier this year or last year.
Well, I don't think, maybe, but I don't think the answer ever came out as to why, even if we're leasing it, they're the tenants, we're the landlords. In regular passage of time and in that relationship, the landlord pays for the care and maintenance of the building, not the tenant. The tenant will take care of the inside, painting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, putting up shelves, et cetera, all of that. But I'm still flummoxed by the fact that the library feels it has to, or has been told it has to, repair the roof of our building. It makes no sense to me, whether the library leases it from us or not. Thank you.
Thank you. As I say, council did have that conversation in November 23rd. Is that the document, Mr. Cameron, you were holding up of 2020? So the answer is in there. Don't want to hold up the process today. We can clarify that in the going forward, but this is the draft budget today, and the ask from the library board through the librarian this afternoon. This is what we're dealing with this afternoon.
Fair enough, but I don't believe we ever came to a conclusion on that.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, another question,
Can I just
Mr. Cameron.
Councilor Malloy, there is
We have too
a
many-
little bit more to that effect in the
just
thing I
a
wrote
second.
there that might
Mary
help
Kate,
with that.
Mary Kate, we have too many
with the
people.
question.
We have too many people speaking at one time. I had Mr.
Sorry.
Cameron about to speak, and then you were, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go to Mr. Cameron first, and then to you, Mary Kate.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification, Tim, there's the commercial lease agreement that they signed back from Jill Eagle. So that's why the decisions were made when we made them. But I think what what the request here from the library is that we perhaps revisit that, and council gets to discuss that, maybe to reinstate it or not to reinstate
Yeah,
it.
because that's like 15 years old,
Yeah, Tim,
at least, yeah.
but it still stands, so
Yeah,
I think it's
I'm-
something that we should consider over the week, and maybe we come back and have a discussion about it. You know, I'm not in favor of discussing it, but I think it's something that we should discuss, and perhaps we can update this document to better suit the
Yeah,
needs of
absolutely, absolutely.
the library.
Just for clarity, and we can have a conversation another day, but that is not what Mary Kate was saying. The library was asking us to take over the responsibility of we'll say the exterior of the building. It was to make a contribution to that cost.
I understand that perfectly
And
well.
again, not to get sidetracked from what we're trying to do today, if council wishes to have a conversation about the lease agreement at another day and time, we can certainly do that. Again, so I'll come back to the motion to receive the information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Mr. Cameron, for the mover, and a seconder would be, thank you, Mr. Foster. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Markham Wolford does hereby receive the following from the Markham Public Library Board. 1, the draft 2021 library budget. 2, the building grant request. And 3, the 2020 annual report. And if there aren't any other questions at this time, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mary Kate, for joining us.
Okay, as I say, I think some of the things that Tim was talking about may be covered a bit in my package.
Yep, thank you very much.
Okay,
Have a good afternoon.
you too. Thank you.
Bye now. And the next item, just before we get into the draft operating capital budget and draft wastewater budget, just to, if I'm going from a process point of view, there's a motion to receive various correspondence from not from staff, and I'll do mover and a seconder for that to receive that correspondence for information purposes. I'll pick up a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Helpy, and a seconder, Mr. Cameron. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Markham Wolford does hereby receive the following regarding the request to pave H.F. McLean Road for information purposes. 1, correspondence from Graham Bonham Carter dated November the 16th, 2020. 2, Marrickville Estates Residents Association presentation dated December the 7th, 2020. Correspondence from Pat Heffernan dated December the 11th, 2020. Correspondence from Joy Clammer dated December the 11th, 2020. Correspondence from Earl Mueller dated dated March the 18th, 2021. And petition signed by Earl Mueller dated March the 18th, 2021. All in favor to receive as information, and that is carried. Thank you. And now I will go back to staff who are going to go over the very high level today. And as you said, we have questions submitted later. So back to you, Mr. Robertson.
Great, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Council. Staff are pleased to present Council today with a draft budget which proposes a 0% tax increase. Staff have been particularly focused at trying to make sure that we're conservative in our submission, given the current climate with the pandemic. I'll just give you 5 or 6 highlights on it beyond that. Certainly this is not a comprehensive list of highlights for you, but I'm just trying to pick off a few things I think Council might be interested in seeing, and certainly willing to talk about anything else Council might discuss. So in that draft budget, one of the things you will note is a change in the operations compensation in the former Public Works Department, currently the Operations Department. When we, over a year ago, merged 2 positions, the fire chief position and the Public Works manager's position, into one position, that left an equipment operator's position vacant. We left that open as a gap We didn't include it in last year's budget because we wanted to see if we could continue to maintain service levels without that. We've done so, but it's been difficult. So what we're proposing today is simply to reinstate that position again. It's been left vacant and we left it out of last year's budget, but we've got it listed here in this one. We know the library's request, as you've already heard, is a 2% increase plus potentially a $3,000 annual building grant that they're considering right now, our council's looking at right now. In order to accomplish this, we have submitted a proposal for sort of a soft contribution for 1 year to the infrastructure reserve this year. So this year's proposed reserve contribution would be in the neighborhood of about $17,000 or so. Normally, we would put in between 70 and perhaps 170 per year, but we're just recognizing the fiscal constraints in the current climate. We also have included a fairly significant amount for maintenance lifts on our tar and chip roads, over $500,000, $520,000 approximately. That's focused on Bates, Reed, Ireland, Weedmark, and part of Snowden's Corners roads. Those are roads that are overdue for a maintenance lift, and we're concerned if we do not get on those, some of those roads will require a complete rebuild at a much greater expense. We've also included, as part of that merging of positions, what that also did for us, as you know, we ran a pilot program where we merged the use of a public works vehicle and a vehicle for the fire chief. And we used that for about 1 year to see if we could get by with using one vehicle for both purposes instead of two, recognizing that we have one manager in that hybrid position. That pilot has been very successful, but we also concurrently have a need to replace another vehicle in the operations department that's quite old, 2002, and it's in very rough shape. So what we've done is we've included a proposal for one vehicle replacement, and we would like to lock in the benefits of that pilot program. It's been very, very successful with faster response rates for the fire chief and so forth. And then the last item I'll just draw your attention to for the moment is...
Could you refer to numbers and places? Because
Yeah.
I'm all over the map trying to find it.
Okay. Well, sorry, my intention was just to give you some highlights, but then
I
you would
really
see
like
them
to
as
see
you...
it.
You'd like to see it right now?
Yeah, please.
Sure, okay. I was
Thank
just
you, Bob.
trying to keep this efficient for you. Bear with me 1 second, I'll get you line items.
We got time, we'll just take our time and see.
I haven't recited them in any particular order, they're just items that I've noted as we've gone through the
Well,
process, so...
just pick up where I interrupted you.
Okay. So bear with me, I'm just going to move to the capital page.
Capital
It
projects.
is near the very back, just before the water and wastewater budget.
So you recommend the capital projects?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, gotcha. Okay.
I'll just pause for a moment, make sure everybody has found that. It's let's see, the 5th page from the back of the package.
Don, it's the budget package, huh?
Don? It's the budget. It's in the back of the budget, Tom.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, that's okay. That's right there.
that's why I couldn't find
That's
it.
why. Next one, keep going back. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's good. There, that's it.
That's it?
That should be it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll try to make sure, Your Worship, that I cover off the items that I've listed. So, on the recommended capital projects, you'll notice the third line from the top is a fire public works truck.
Mhm.
That's a vehicle I was just discussing at the last moment. It's for hybrid use. It's a continuation, or I guess, making permanent the benefits that we've noted in the pilot project where we use a single vehicle for the fire chief and the manager of operations. It's improved service times, like response times, but also it's allowed us to avoid the need to replace 2 trucks instead of 1, although not necessarily quite as simple as that, but it's generally the outcome of it.
So
And
the total cost of that would be 120,000 then? Is that right?
no, actually, the total cost would be $60,000. One of the reasons we're putting it in right now, and one of the benefits of doing this as a hybrid use truck, is because it would be also used for fire response.
Yes, I understand, yeah.
The fire chief has been able to find a source where he can get emergency vehicle pricing on it. Very, very favorable pricing.
No, I was just looking at the fact that it was listed under the 2021 budget, then it was also listed under reserves, so I was wondering.
Oh, I'm sorry, the reserves is the funding source.
Okay.
So the money would be coming from reserves, from the
Gotcha.
fire reserve.
Okay.
I was also going to mention to you on that capital item further down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 9 items from the bottom of that first section. There's a fire rescue pumper truck. And the amount is $175,000.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's just, all we're listing there is a contribution to the reserve for the planned replacement of our current truck. And tentatively, subject to council's approval, we would issue an RFP for a replacement vehicle this year with the full expenditure occurring in 2022. That's just the bottom line I think we've got to.
And do we have, sorry to interrupt, do we have any money in reserves for that already? Have we been putting money away for that?
We do, I believe, Your Worship, bear with me. The total cost for the vehicle,
Through the chair, thanks, Tim.
so that what's in the reserve right now, that the fire chief has mentioned to me, sorry, that the treasurer, it's okay, thanks, Kirsten. The current balance in the reserve is about $373,500,
Oh, okay.
$373,500. With this additional $175,000, we believe that we can cover the cost of the truck at $548,500. Nope, it's going to take more than that. Oh, sorry, and of course, there'll be a contribution next year as well,
So it rolls over to next year also?
correct, yeah, this is an accumulated amount. We
Yeah.
also have to make a contribution next year as well to
Yeah.
bring it up to the total cost. Thank you, Worship.
Mr. Cameron.
Yes, thank you. How many pumper trucks do we have currently? Is that the only one we have? Or do we have other vehicles that can serve as a pumper truck?
Well, just allow the fire chief to respond to that.
And the condition that we're in, please.
Here we currently have our 2006 ladder truck, which has a pump on it, and we have our 2017 tanker, which also has a pump. This truck would replace our 1991 pumper truck as well as our rescue truck, so we combine 2 trucks into one.
So, if I understand correctly, we have 3 pumper trucks, and what we want to do is replace the older one?
That's correct. The one truck is a tanker pumper, but it's needed as a tanker, but has a pump on it. And then the aerial truck also has a pump on it, but the truck that would be replaced is used primarily for car accidents, grass fires, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and that last truck that you indicated was it a 96 that you said? 1996?
The one to be replaced in 1991.
Oh, 1991, sorry. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to you, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's no other questions regarding the fire vehicle, I'll just refer you to line items 4 through 9 in that same table, which is the list of roads for tar and chip. It gives you the breakdown of the amounts forecasted for each road. And if there are no questions with that, I'll just take you back. The other item one other item, the key item I had highlighted for you was the equipment operator's position in Public Works, or the operations department. They're looking, I'll just find that page for you. And I just, I mentioned this item for council just because on paper, it's you see a difference between the 2020 actuals and the 2021 forecasted budget. So I just wanted to explain that before you see it. So that would be, let me see here. Page 9 of your package, Your Worship.
The budget?
Of the budget, yeah, under Public Works. And it's the first line item under expenses.
Okay.
note versus like this. It's the ninth page in the overall village budget.
And the line item would be?
The line item is, it's line 10 on the table, and the budget line item is 17-3110.
Well, no, just the line item is the easy one to find.
Sure, line item 10,
Okay. Under public works.
under public works. Yeah. So I was just drawing your attention to that because I was assuming that it would generate some questions when you go over the budget at home. But if you look under column H, which is the 2020 actuals, and column I, which is the 2021 projected budget, you'll see a difference there. A large part of that is that in 2020 we had a gap where we had a vacant position. We didn't budget the dollars for it. We had the vacant position on the books still. We didn't budget the dollars because we wanted to see if we could do with that savings.
And we found that it's not.
We just found it's too challenging versus recovering vacations and everything else to be able to run with the reduced equipment operation.
Okay.
I think that's the key highlights I had. There may be some more items in there. Certainly happy to answer any questions that you see now or next week. Those are ones that just in the process of, as we developed this, that have kind of popped for me that I thought might draw council's interest.
Mr. Cameron?
Thank you. Just one quick question. Roads that we just discussed previous to this last item, are these the only roads that staff is considering doing? Or am I just not seeing it in the rest of the document?
So I
Recommended capital projects.
So I think the short answer to that is it has to be a yes, unfortunately, because that's what we have the funds to do, and those are the highest priority items identified as we reviewed our road assets through our asset management plan review. Certainly, Brad Cole can answer further questions on that if you have any detailed questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? Is there any, sorry, Mr. Foster?
So our capital roads are essentially being funded by the the gas tax and the OCIF. So that's almost the entire budget for roads that's coming out of it, which is fairly traditional. So we doubled down on our gas tax this year. We see twice as much money, so that's what's allowing us to do this. In a normal year, do we depend entirely upon the gas tax and the OCIF to fund roads?
I'm going to have to defer to the treasurer on that just because I don't want to misspeak in terms of what the traditional sources of funding are. You know, the gas tax is a primary one, certainly. Gas tax does have some limitations on it, just for information on where we can use it. It can't be used for new roads, for example, but it can be used for maintaining old ones. It can be kept in the reserve for use with water, wastewater, system expansion, and so forth. But I'm just going to look to the treasurer to answer your question.
Yes, thank you. Roads aren't solely funded by that, but they're often funded in part by gas tax and OCIF because those two sources of funding can only be used for infrastructure. So we can't use them for equipment, we can't use them for buildings, we can use them for water, wastewater, and roads. We have carried some of the previous year's gas tax, which is why we have a chunk of it to be used. Sometimes roads are funded out of taxation. It just really depends on the year and the funding that needs to be done.
So this budget comes in with a 0% tax increase. If we were to hope to pay HF McLean Road, we would require at roughly $30,000 per 1% tax increase. We would require at least a 5% tax increase to fund HF McLean's
Correct.
upgraded rate. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
So again, sorry, Mr. Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you. Just going back into conversation a little bit, when we go home and ponder this budget were to send our questions to you on the Monday, will we be receiving a request, or I mean, an answer to our questions prior to us having the meeting, or will we be discussing that at the next meeting?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, just to set the context a little bit, the procedure bylaw for questions to staff usually sets the approach, which would be to provide questions in advance for staff so that staff can come prepared to a council meeting. With this, if we receive the questions on the Monday, it may take us a couple of days to be able to do the research and bring it back. So my intention was that we would answer those questions in the meeting on Wednesday. Certainly happy to follow a different approach if council would prefer a different approach.
I was just wondering, just in case our question and your answer raises another question, which would sort of put us back into the position we are now. You're unprepared for the next question. So would it be perhaps something to consider that when you come back with the questions that we have and the answers that you're going to be given, that we would be able to set aside another meeting in order to facilitate those additional questions?
Thank you, Councilor. So actually, just to be clear, the purpose for getting the questions in advance was not to eliminate the opportunity to ask other questions on Wednesday next week, and certainly have that opportunity. And certainly, if there are remaining questions, this is a filtering process as we go through it, so that council can feel fully assured and confident that you have a deep enough understanding before you vote on approving the budget. So if it requires additional meetings, certainly happy to facilitate that.
Mr. Foster?
Yeah, and under the recommended capital projects, I notice there's nothing here for any of the urban streets in Marshall that are in a quite state of disrepair. Is there any, we have a fund somewhere or a reserve for repairing those, or we want to just ignore them?
I don't like to ignore anything that's in disrepair, certainly. Our challenge is the limitation we have in our funding. And the challenge, we've had this discussion, I can certainly pass this on to the manager of operations or the treasurer for further answers to you, but in a nutshell, the challenge with urban roads in Marshall proper, if you want to excuse the term, is that we also have underground plant there, water and sewer lines and so forth. And the surface infrastructure and the below-grade infrastructure, we try to align those in terms of life cycle needs and replacements. And it makes those projects a much, much more expensive project. And for example, case in point, as you're familiar with, is Drummond, St. Louis and St. Patrick that we did 2 years ago, was a little over $2 million project, we in the neighborhood of $2.2 million. Typically, we rely and need to seek out grant funding to be able to carry that kind of a cost in our capital budget. We just don't have the tax base for us to be able to put aside that kind of money in advance, unfortunately. So you're absolutely correct, and it's very astute of you to notice. We don't have something in this year's budget to do a major infrastructure repair within the village. Certainly always looking for roads where we think the buried plant, the below-grade plant, has a lot of life cycle ahead of it, left in it, where the surface needs repairs or replacement, and we absolutely can target those. And I'm sure that Brad Cole can speak to what he's, or even Kirsten can speak to what they're seeing in the asset management plan right now. But at the moment, the highest priority staff felt was getting those tar and chip roads preserved so that we don't incur a much greater cost for a full reinstatement or a full replacement of those roads relative to what we have to spend right now.
So if I could just supplement on that before, I think Mr. Foster may have another question, but it's one thing to, we'll say, visually see a road on the surface that, quote unquote, warrants replacing, upgrading, and you can get a bit of an idea of what the estimate of that would be, but it's what's underneath it in the urban area, and which leads to all the more reason to do and the value to have that roads needs analysis, which includes below the blacktop, if you will, as to the state of that infrastructure, to get an idea as to, therefore, what would the cost be to do work on a block of street in the urban area. Mr. Foster.
Yeah, just didn't see under capital projects, this might be a carryover from last year, but the new building at the landfill, so that's from last year's budget, we've got to carry forward on that, so that's not appearing as a capital project. Yeah, that's right.
One moment, Your Worship. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Worship. That's right. We do have a list, just to draw your attention to, below the recommended capital projects, a list of carry forward projects. And you'll see that list.
Oh, there it is, yeah, landfill building.
LF building is, I think it's the last item in that section of the table.
Okay. Do we have plans, we discussed it before, again, we can wait for discussion for later, but putting, having some sort of a shelter for our compactor. That's quite an asset that we purchased there and it's sitting outside as it was anyway, I'm not sure what the position it is now. Is there plans to even put a tarp structure over it, or?
Your Worship, we didn't include it in this year's budget because of the funding constraints, but it is planned for hopefully next year.
So it's gonna sit out there in for another year?
Correct.
Maybe we can buy a big tarp.
Yeah.
That's all I had to offer, Council, just in terms of highlights.
Yeah.
I don't want to, if there are other questions, I have the answer.
I do, Mr. Malloy had a question, and then I have a question.
Just going back to the roads in the village, but we're still doing some maintenance on the roads, eh? That can be, work that can be done without, you know, digging into them and things into them.
Band-Aids.
Pardon?
Band-Aids?
Band-Aid, sure.
Your Worship, we do have planned crack sealing within the urban area this year. And we'll continue to do patching and whatnot as we can, but we don't have any large projects planned.
Yeah, if I may, 'cause I was just thinking of one over on the south side where it's in pretty bad shape. Rito Street, I think it changes names as it crosses Mill Street. But it's Rito, and it pools, the water pools there really in front of one house quite extensively. And it's patched all over, it's patched, oh no. It's patched all over the place, so I was just curious, are we doing, I'm not suggesting it become a main project, but is there something we can do about at least getting it more operational?
Your Worship, we can certainly have a look at that. I would have to analyze it to see what the costing would be, but we can have a look at it.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Robertson, if you could capture what we have presented to us today, and if I'm reading it correctly, carrying up on the recommended capital projects page. So they're the recommended capital projects down to chamber map display. Those are all the dollars of the pages before that and up to here would represent what kind of a tax increase in the draft?
Just so that I can be sure I understand your question, forgive me if I paraphrase it incorrectly here.
Yeah.
Are you asking the items under recommended capital projects, all of them, what representative tax increase they would equal to? I'm going to turn to our numbers lady, if you don't mind.
So my understanding, I just want to be clear, so my understanding that would be a 0% tax increase.
That's correct.
Oh,
Thank you. And then in terms of the other items after that, the carry forward projects, they do not represent any new tax dollars. Those are projects, as it says, I think deferred from last year. They collected last year, so we're spending this year, right? And then the additional items, anything after that would be, does that necessitate some kind of a tax increase? Should we agree to any of those moving forward?
correct.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure everybody was crystal clear on that.
Yeah, I should emphasize that,
Yeah.
but the additional items listed at the bottom of that table are not
Yep.
included in the budget currently.
Would represent a tax increase should we choose to move forward in some form. Mr. Cameron?
Thank you.
How is staff going to approach the public on this input? Are we going to post this presentation online so so the public has time to review and they may send their questions to staff? Is that the consideration? And as this process moves along, are we going to allow the public to address council through a non-personal approach, through some kind of an electronic approach? Are we going to allow that to live stream as we get closer to the end of the budget to allow input to the public? Is that the plan that staff is moving forward with?
So we'll be following the practice as we've always done in previous years. We have a working document, and when we get to we'll call it get to our finalized draft, budget before actually filing it, typically we would have a public information meeting, as we've done in previous years, where staff would do a very high-level highlight of the budget. And then after that, people can ask questions about what our final draft budget is like, and then council would pass the budget. So it's not a meeting to, what's the word, for input, if that's what you're referring to. People can ask questions, and challenging this year with COVID. So, I mean, when we get to that point, my suggestion would be that staff put together, we'll call it their slide presentation. They would do it at a public meeting. Let everybody know. We have that posted on our website, Facebook page, and folks may have questions, but it's a sharing of the information to the public at that point, and then we ultimately pass the budget. Big challenge this year is, not being able to do that publicly, if you will, the community center here and in Easton's Corners.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the public's only going to get involved at our final draft. We're not going to allow them the opportunity to pipe in prior to that, so that we can perhaps get a feel for what the public wants or the direction that they may want council to move in. So we're just going to do what we did last year and the year before, is just have one public meeting and allow them to send something in writing at that time after the presentation. We're not going to allow any subsequent interaction with the public. Is that correct?
Well, our work is here to, working with staff to work and have a draft budget, and if you will, do that presentation to the public, or let the public know. Not every municipality does it a wee bit differently. For example, the county, once the budget is passed, it's posted on the website, kind of thing, and we'll do the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, staff. When we post the budget, it is the line-by-line budget that gets posted, but we can also do, as they say, that slide deck presentation, high level, here's public works, here's, fire, et cetera, is contained in the budget. So keeping that open for everybody to know. If there aren't any other questions or anything else staff have to say today, just remind everybody, so if you have any questions, send them into, now, who would you like the questions to go to? To the treasurer?
Sir, either the treasurer, myself, or both. If somebody,
Okay.
both of us, would be most efficient.
So let's go with the CAO and treasurer, and in by, we'll say noon by Monday, and so staff can be able to get the answers for us. So those answers, questions and answers will be available to everybody next Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and so we can see the answers, and there may be obviously potentially rather other questions when we meet next Wednesday, and we'll move forward from there. So if everybody's good with that, we do have a motion to receive the draft operating capital and wastewater budgets for information purposes. So thank you, Mr. Foster, and a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Mayor Wolford does hereby receive the 2001 draft operating capital and wastewater budget for information purposes. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And we'll do a confirmatory bylaw for the proceedings. So a mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Mr. Helpney, and a seconder, Mr. Foster. Be it hereby resolved that bylaw 18-2021, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of meeting of the April 6, 2021 be read a first and second time, and the bylaw 18-2021 be read a third and final time and passed. All in favor? That's carried. And before I get to the adjournment, I want to thank staff, whether it's Miracle Wolford or the other 444 municipalities in the province and counties. I know there's a huge amount of work, not just with our treasurer, but with our CAO quarterbacking with the other department heads to bring forward a draft budget. And it's very encouraging to know that, as every member of council does, staff does as well, acknowledge the challenges this year with the pandemic and bringing forward a draft with some significant public works projects in there that is at zero at the moment. And so council will work through the balance of it and come up with the final budget a little later. But through the CAO to your team, treasurer, department heads, thanks very much for the significant work that you've done. I'll say to date, there may be more work to do, I'm sure.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you. And so mover and a seconder for adjournment, please. Thank you, Mr. Malloy, and seconder, Mr. Foster. Be it hereby resolved that this special meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Miracle Wolford is now adjourned at 2:15 p.m. until the next regular meeting of council on Monday, April the 12th, 2021 at 2 p.m. or until the next call of the mayor subject to read. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you one and all.